here behind me over so many years. They're a very, very important fighting organisation in support of the Jewish state. And may I ask you, please, if you don't support them in every possible way you can. And I recognise being here today is not only supporting Israel, but supporting the wonderful UN Watch. Ladies and gentlemen, I was on the border with Gaza a couple of days ago, and I've been there many times since this violence began about a year ago. I've seen exactly what happens. I've not been sitting with the press. The IDF have allowed me to go right to the very front lines with the snipers, with the observers, and with the commanders, so I can see for myself precisely what is happening and not have to listen to this nonsense and believe it, and I don't anyway. But so I've got first-hand knowledge of what Hamas have done and first-hand knowledge of what the IDF has done, and I'm going to tell you about that now. I came here to your wonderful city of Geneva in December, and I spoke then, I gave evidence to your less than wonderful Human Rights Commission of Inquiry just inside that building there for several hours. I told them from my own professional experience what was the reality of what happened on the border. They did not listen to one word I said. And in this report that they produced, nothing I said is reflected. This report is a tissue of lies, abuse, prejudice, and distortion. It is not worth the paper it's printed on. I told them that Hamas's objective was to do what it's done with rockets and with attack tunnels burying underneath the borders of Israel, to attack, to slaughter, and to kidnap Israeli civilians in the communities near the border. That was what Hamas's objective was, to persuade the IDF to counter the attacks and kill their own civilian population. Hamas is the only army in history, if you could call it an army, which has deliberately tried to entice its enemies to kill its own people. Can you believe that? That's what Hamas does. It's what Hamas tries to do in everything it does. It's what Hamas tried to do by these violent demonstrations on the border. They had no idea that they would actually break through the border and carry out successful attacks against Israel. They wanted to, but they didn't expect to. What they wanted was Israeli defensive action that they saw, so that people like this in the building behind me could condemn Israel for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, and for unnecessarily killing innocent civilians. That is their plan. That's their objective. And of course, many, many people, including media, human rights organizations, NGOs, universities, politicians, they all play straight into the hands of Hamas. The IDF. I worked very closely with the IDF for many years. They are one of the finest armies in the world. I say one of the finest armies in the world because obviously as a British soldier, the British Army is the finest in the world. I know you'll all agree with that. They are phenomenally professional people. They work incredibly hard, and in trying to save the lives of innocent civilians on the enemy side in Gaza, they put themselves at risk, they are in danger, and they sometimes pay the supreme sacrifice. And they're sometimes very seriously wounded. I was there on the border recently with some of the incidents and watching and talking to young Israeli soldiers, 19 years of age, 18 years of age, day in, day out, putting their lives on the line to come back and watch on television the kind of filth that's poured out against them by the international media. It's shocking. And when you see and when you hear about people like Staff Sergeant Gal Kaidan, who was stabbed to death in Israel only yesterday, when you see that, and when you see Rabbi Ettinger killed and another soldier shot now in critical condition, you can appreciate the danger these men are on day in and day out in the West Bank, or I get into trouble for saying the West Bank, so I mean Judea and Samaria, and in the Gaza border. And we can only, I think, honour and appreciate and respect the sacrifices they make for the state of Israel, and not just for the state of Israel, but for the whole world, because they are at the front line of all of our fights against international jihad.
Bravo.
They took every possible step to prevent losing lives of civilians on the other side. Every single thing you could do. I've served in this situation. I've commanded British troops facing rioting crowds with terrorists in among them armed with bombs and guns, trying to kill my troops. I've been in that situation, and I've thought to myself, amidst all the criticism, what could the IDF do more that it didn't do? How could the IDF prevent the loss of life in Gaza while still protecting their own civilian population? And I can't think of anything. I served in this kind of situation for 30 years. 30 years. I can't think of anything. But the geniuses inside this building, they say Israel should have done it differently. But none of them can tell you how Israel could have done it differently. Nobody can tell you how Israel could have done it differently. If Israel had done it differently, the border would have been breached, thousands of people would have poured through, they would have aimed straight for the Israeli communities just on the other side of the border, with the intention of cutting them to pieces, shooting them and kidnapping. And would the IDF have allowed that? No. So what would the IDF have had to do? It would have had to kill many, many more of them than it ended up killing in the process of defending the border. Because if you've got thousands of civilians breaking through and terrorists among them, you simply can't let them get into those communities. And there's no other way of stopping them except by shooting them. So really, they acted in a very restrained way. They put their own lives on the line. The IDF don't deserve the vilification they get in here. They deserve the Nobel Peace Prize.